Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with Abraham Lincoln, the new man from the West, talking about a little bit of Abraham Lincoln's start and where he kind of came from before he became president. But we're now on to the South secedes, and not the most flattering picture you could say. Southern secession took place in two stages. The lower South, the Cotton States, withdrew from the Union in consequence of Lincoln's election. A northern tier, including Virginia, seceded on the question of states' rights, and President Lincoln resolved to hold the nation together by force. Some border states, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and the mountainous part of Virginia that formed a new state, West Virginia, still held to the Union. 11 states formed the new Confederate States of America. They were Virginia, North and South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Florida, and Texas. I got that backed up. The new nation had a population of approximately 5.5 million whites and 3.5 million slaves. The new Constitution was closely modeled on that of the United States, with a new, with a more explicit recognition of slavery and states' rights, and a few technical improvements in the relation of the President to Congress. The flag, known as the Stars and Bars, was a newly patterned tricolor of red, white, and blue. The more familiar St. Andrew's Cross was a battle flag. The capital was established at first in Montgomery, Alabama, and later at Richmond, Virginia. Jefferson Davis of Mississippi was the only president, and his entire term was filled with war. He was born in Kentucky, not far from Lincoln's first home, but he moved south instead of north and became an owner of a great plantation. Alexander Stephens of Georgia, at first an opponent of secession, was made vice president. As the North had a much greater population than the Confederacy, an even greater advantage in industrial wealth and command of the sea, one would have expected an early victory. Actually, the war which followed, called in the North the Rebellion, and in the South the War between States, and by the rest of the world at large, the American Civil War, was one of the most closely contested wars in history. The South had a strong military tradition, many able generals, and a population accustomed to ride and shoot and live in the open area. But the greatest asset on the Confederate side was simply that to win, the South had to merely hold its own, and the North had to conquer every part of the Confederacy. So yeah, they got a decent point there. The South really only has to hold until the North gives up. It's basically all they have to do. And they could have won maybe that way. Not with Lincoln as president, but just saying. The Stars and Bars, the flag, that it doesn't really get shown as much. A lot of times what people are shown is, like they said, the St. Andrew's Cross, which is the orange flag with these the diagonal stripes on it, the two blue stripes with the white stars. That is the St. Andrew's Cross. It's kind of like a Union Jack almost, and it gets slapped onto a lot of flags. It's kind of why people think that was the flag, but it wasn't. Stars and Bars was. But yeah, the Confederacy, some of them leave for, as they would say, states' rights, but a lot of them left for the states' rights to have slaves. That's what the states' rights were. And so even at the beginning of the nation, there was kind of this idea still that, states are their own individual thing, and they are part of the Union. So a lot of the speaking of the time, people would say these United States. They wouldn't say the United States, for instance. Um, and that gets kind of taught out of people. After the Civil War, there was a big government push to change the dialogue that people had about the states. So they would say the United States, not these United States. Um, I know it sounds something very simple, but yeah. A lot of changes after the Civil War to try to bring more of a national unity rather than a state unity. Um, but yeah, there's a lot more love for your state a lot of times. Actually, it works against Jefferson Davis a little bit later. Lincoln is able to do quite a lot of things, military powers, things like that, that Jefferson Davis just isn't able to do. Some states just straight up refuse Davis, and they make the war very hard for him. And that's one of the things too that I wonder if they will get into. The South kind of was fighting against itself to even exist in a lot of ways. They wanted to all just kind of like live on their own and think it'd be hunky dory, but it's not so simple. Why they ever thought it was, I don't know. But now we'll get into the picture. So above is an example of industry in the North. The Colt Firearms Company in Hartford, Connecticut. So Colt, obviously, we know who they are. Um, very well-known gun manufacturer. Yeah, they were around this time. They were making guns for the Union. Colt pattern rifles, revolvers, lever guns, even potentially. Uh, all very useful, of course. Below is Jefferson Davis and uh, and his cabinet. So actually, right here, this is Jefferson Davis and his cabinet. Um, Now, Robert E. Lee, technically not per se, but he is in that photo. Um, Robert E. Lee, actually, if you really want to know, didn't really want, wasn't really respected, I should say, more so by a lot of the Confederacy, by the top brass, you should say, I should say at first. Jefferson Davis trusted him, but yeah, most of them didn't really trust in General Lee there, which is interesting. General Lee is the closest thing you could say to American royalty, really. His wife is part of the family line that of George Washington, actually. Um, it's not George Washington's kids because George Washington didn't have any kids, but his adoptive kids. It's descended through that. So Lee is more or less American royalty. Um, Maybe it's why some people didn't have such the greatest opinion of him. And to the right, it's Davis from Mississippi was elected the president of the Confederate States of America in October 1861. Yeah, this picture doesn't really show him very well, though. That's why you don't usually do this, because it doesn't turn out quite right. And then over here is South Carolina voted an ordinance of secession from the Union, repealing its 1788 ratification of the Constitution on the 20th of December, 1860. Between the 9th of January and the 8th of June, 1861, 10 other states followed her. Yeah, so they just kind of were like, oh, we no longer agree to this, and we kind of leaving. That was not technically legal. There was no. It was kind of written into the Constitution that wasn't really allowed. Uh, Now, it never gets brought to trial. None of these individuals are brought to trial, and one of the reasons is people kind of worried that maybe it would be considered constitutional in some way. So they just didn't even mess with it. They just said it's fine, whatever. But it wasn't. It's for instance, uh, like even Texas says, oh, we're the only state that can. They can't either. No state can, um, technically. Now there are ways that they maybe could have, but the way they do it, no. Just passing an ordinance saying, oh, we don't believe in the United States anymore. Goodbye. It's technically not allowed. The founding fathers thought of that. Don't worry. But that's gonna do it for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you're wondering how to improve these videos, please leave a comment down below. I just appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.